Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Cosmic Cast. What's up, molesters? What's up, investors? Okay, no, but today's a special day. Today's my solo episode. Don't worry, I can hear you all clicking off through the screen. Wanted to talk a little bit, though, about us as a podcast. That's four dudes. So I'm sure it doesn't take a degree in political science to tell you that the four of us are completely different people, although it is kind of funny how neatly we can be split into groups of two. For instance, just physically speaking, two of us have pale complexions, brown hair, non-brown eyes, and names that end with an N sound, and the other two do not. Two of us went to college, the other two did not. Two of us work in the entertainment industry, the other two do not. At one time I could have said that two of us have a car and the other two do not, but that's actually not true. I'm the only one without a car now. Two of us routinely wear hats, the other two do not. Two of us would fall on the... You know what? Actually, I'm not going to finish that one. And two of us have musical talent, or at least can find the beat. And the other two, let's just say, I had to spend about an hour chopping up Jason's verse on No More White Woman 2020, and Ari just yelled. So it's not like there's no talent, it's just that you have to mine for it in the bedrock with an iron pickaxe. Okay, no, but really, the four of us really are very unique. And it's quite fascinating to me that we haven't gotten sick of each other yet. Oh, don't worry, there's been some flare-ups every now and then. Like, honestly, I'm still recovering from the abuse I suffered in Boston. But I mean, like, personality-wise, I think out of the four of us, Jacob is definitely the most extroverted, in that he is the one that feels awkward if he doesn't say anything. I've hung out with him twice, and he can't go more than 10 seconds without saying something, which for me, I'm sure you've heard it on the episodes, I can go like 10 minutes, easily. I'm actually very proud of the fact that I once went 4 days, actually twice, I went 4 days without saying a single word. And then like Jason is kind of an ambivert, I think, but he is more willing to put himself out there, I think. And then Ari is just kind of there, but once he settles in, you know, you've heard him, right? He'll be as loud as anyone. He'll be having a good time. So you can put us on like the introvert-extrovert scale, and then there's the gamer scale, of which like I used to play a lot more games than I play now. And, you know, Jason plays games for fun when he can, and Jacob same, and Ari is definitely the most serious gamer out of all of us. But even he doesn't have as much time as what he would like. I think that's what I'd like to talk about today, actually. Time, and how little we have of it these days. In fact, the reason I'm doing this solo episode is because we couldn't find the time. Our schedules are such that it's so hard to cut a hole at the same place at the same time for all of us. They're like parasitic vines that have taken over the tree of the Cosmic Cast, and you know we've branched out on our own branches, and so like once they leave that main center of the tree, they might never overlap again unless you force them. So I think I'm gonna, without getting too specific, I think I'm gonna talk about the quirks in our personality and our lives that have led us to this point. And I think I'm also going to talk about, you know, just the experience of being in a creative group. And yes, we do count as a creative group. Like, come on, we've been making these podcast episodes for over 6 years. We're over 150 episodes, as well as multiple spin-off things. I think we have a slight claim to the title of creative. Like, after like the first like 20 episodes or so, you probably wouldn't call us much creative. But look at all the stuff we've done since then. Oh, and my apologies if you've never seen the first 20 episodes or so. They're classics. And like most classics, you know, they have aged. And that's why the decision was made by some in our group to take them down. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Anyways, I'd like to set the stage with like a sort of personality comparison with, alright, Reagan, you can scream now, the Beatles. Yes, the Beatles. Have you guys watched that documentary on Disney Plus called Get Back? You know, the Beatles documentary where they're in the studio and then they go on the roof and they play. I'll understand if you haven't, because it is kind of geared towards fans of the Beatles and musicians, which I kind of happen to be both. So I watched the whole thing, 7.5 hours. Felt like a Lord of the Rings marathon. And before I go any further, let me just say that Ringo Starr, he did not make a single mistake the entire time, which is amazing because like half the time, instead of like working on their own stuff, somebody, usually John, would just yell out the first line of a rock and roll song and they'd just start jamming. And still, Ringo, he was solid as a rock. Most underrated drummer of all time. Anyways, enough of that. So personality-wise, I think the easiest comparison to make is Jason is Paul. He's the boss. As much as he tries to deny it, he is the one that has steered the main creative direction of the group since like 2020. Classic fans might remember that we took a break at the end of 2019 and sort of got our ducks in a row which was about the time that I moved from Georgia to Florida and about the time that Jacob finally got an iPhone, which was epic because we could finally start the iMessage chat. And every so often, someone, usually me actually, would say, so, when are we going to make another episode? Like, seriously. But it did not happen until Jason finally caught a fire for it. Right about the time that quarantine started, Jason started doing like a bunch of research into the algorithm and all that and just seeing what was popping off and getting addicted to TikTok. And as a result, he was like inspired and he sort of pushed that inspiration onto us, which, to be fair, I didn't need it at the time. Not to brag or anything, but yeah, I was always like, come on guys, let's do it. Jacob was the one that wasn't too into it and Ari was just kind of eh. But when Jason caught that inspiration, he pushed that onto all of us and we all started, sort of feeling it. Took some of us longer than others, but when we came back with that one episode, I think that was the one that was called Leafy Made Us Come Back, and a certain something happened that I'm sure Jacob doesn't want me to mention in that episode. It was mostly harmless, but, I'm sure you don't want us to... Ari almost got evicted from that episode. It was crazy stuff. But, when we did that episode, it felt like it was the best we'd ever done. This sort of validated Jason as the de facto leader, and so, he became Paul. Ever since then, pretty much every single direction that we've taken has been 100% his idea. And he'll probably try to deny it, but it's the truth. It really is. The idea of the revamp we did with the spaceship interior, that was all him. And we contributed, like little bits and pieces here and there, but the overall idea was him. That was all from his mind. The idea of having a revamp to do that instead of using the same old Bill Spooks avatars, which, shout out Bill Spooks, we've gotten so much mileage off of those. I still use those in TikTok edits to this day. But we got good old Frost Drive, aka, I think Mocha Alex is Frost Drive's new name, but, Frost Drive at the time to draw everything and came out great, and that's what we used all that time. But that was Jason's idea. Because that's him, he's the idea man and he's the one that's going to push the ideas through, And that's why it hurts when these ideas don't come to fruition, which that's not just the merch, there's other ideas that haven't worked as well, and it hurts him because they are his ideas. And it's like, if an idea comes from any of us, but he's not excited about it, then eventually we're going to be like, well, bruh, we try, bruh, but it just ain't going over well. It's going to feel like none of us are excited about it if he's not excited about it. And not to say that he's actually the abusive, controlling father or whatever. It's just, that's just how the personalities are. He is Paul. This new revamp that's almost done thanks to some dude funding us. Speaking of some dude, if you could slide me like a 20 or something here. No, I'm just kidding. But this revamp that we've been working on for probably about a year now. I don't want to think about how long it's been. That was him. That was all him. He was the one that wanted to do this. And the merch was his idea. The Cosmic Chit Chat, was that his idea or was that Jacob? I can't remember actually. But similar to how I was saying that we should, come back in 2019, 2020, I was the one that was saying we got to do something for content, that whole time in 2022 when we were off. So maybe that was my idea, I don't know. But turning the reaction to the strange thing about the Johnsons and Morbius movies into videos, that was Jason's idea. We've made a couple Let's Play videos. Only one or two have seen the light of day because they are really, really hard to edit. Those are his idea. And trust me, he's tried to get us to do way more. Trust me, there's been so many games that we've been talking about doing videos on, but because he has never sat us down and be like, okay guys, this week we're doing this game, install it, get ready to record. He's never done that, except for those games that we've actually recorded videos for. That's just how it is. I don't know what to tell you. He is Paul.
Hello everybody, this is Jacob cutting in for a moment to remind you that Jason also had the idea for the Cosmic SMP, and partially because he stopped being active in it, it died. Okay, bye-bye, stay fermented everybody.
Now, unlike Paul, he doesn't want to have his foot in like every single step of the creative process, which is partly because he doesn't really know how to do what I do, so fair enough, I guess. But even if he did, I think he would still be like, you got it, bro. Take care of it. You do you. Because when I edit TikToks, he doesn't tell me exactly what to do. He just gives a few ideas. He has a document. Oh, by the way, editing the TikTok clips. His idea. He is Paul. He has like ideas for each TikTok clip that we edit, but by no means, if we don't follow that, does he say, hey, bro, you didn't follow my creative vision. How dare you? How dare you deviate? Like, bro, I have the best ideas. Don't you know that? No, he ain't like that. He's usually quite complimentary, actually. That's just the difference in personalities, because me, I'm always like, well, not bad, but I think you should do this and this. Like, I'm the one that's offering suggestions on what to change because I feel like I'm more of a finisher, I see something that's been started and I'm like, okay, I see the vision. I think this and this would sort of refine it and, trim the fat. That's another way that he kind of differs from Paul. Like Paul, he heard the guy record the trumpet solo on Penny Lane. First take, George Martin, the legendary producer, is right there. And he's like, that's perfect. Paul goes, not bad. Now, can you do it one more time then? That was more of a Ringo accent in a Paul timbre, but George Martin has to look him dead in the eye and go, Paul, my dear chap, I don't think he can do that any better than that. That is not George Martin's accent, but He goes, I don't think he can do that any better. Jason is not like that. But I think in the idea respect, he is Paul. So, Jacob is John. Jacob is John, bruh. People talk about, the reasons why the Beatles broke up. It was a few different reasons, but the number one reason was actually financial. The number two reason was because John wasn't feeling it anymore. John wanted to spend time with Yoko. It was when he had done that show in '69 with the Plastic Ono Band, the one where he was swinging his guitar in front of the amp. And when he was coming back, he sort of just put it together. He's like, I had more fun doing that than I have had with the Beatles. And for whatever reason, he just felt that way. Sure, he had quarreled with Paul a bit. Sure, he'd quarreled with pretty much everyone, to be honest. Sure, he had gotten lazy. Sure, he was doing a ton of heroin. But I think the main reason just ended up being that he'd found more joy in playing with Yoko than with the other guys, And without any of them, the Beatles are not the Beatles, but the Beatles was John's band. He started the band. It was his band from the start. And he added Paul to the band, and Paul added George, and Brian Epstein added Ringo. But John is the most, I think, definitely the most unique out of the Beatles. Just in how he acted and how he interpreted the world. He definitely would always have the most interesting things to say, and sometimes they'd be flat out crazy. See the 1972 hit, Woman is the, just look it up. John Lennon, Woman is the... But also, I feel like he was always, searching for a deeper meaning to things. Always searching. But at the same time, he could be extremely irreverent. Always a jokester, never serious. In fact, that was one of the reasons why Paul and John would quarrel, is because Paul was still putting in the work, but John just wasn't. And he would turn out a few good songs every now and then, but, there was a time when John just wasn't writing anything. All he was doing was, the peace protests and heroin. These are mostly all qualities that remind me of Jacob. The peace protest thing, not so much. He ain't gonna be doing that. But out of all of us, Jacob is the one that has struggled with his motivation the most. Now these days, ever since 2023, he's been locked in. He's followed the opposite trajectory of John. John was more locked in the early days, and Jacob is more locked in now. But there was a time when, he'd be ghosting us, he'd be cokering us. There ain't no lie there. He would be cokering us, bruh. We'd try to reach out to him in the group chat. It'd be time to record, and he'd be nowhere to be found. And we'd be like, well, guess we're just gonna have to try again next week, bruh. And I would reach out to him on private DMs, and he'd be like, I know you online, bruh. And then he would come into the group chat later and be like, bro, I was out with friends, bro. And it'd be like, bruh, you didn't want to tell us that beforehand? He might have made it up sometimes, he might have not. And of course, yes, he did have a Yoko Ono against whom we fought for Jacob's affection at times. Though these days, of course, like I said, opposite of John's trajectory, we do not have to fight so much for Jacob's attention. Jacob, he has his priorities lined up and he's able to slot out time, and he's much more mature about that. That Yoko Ono's name was Michael Drake. Bruh, I gotta call it out right now, bruh. Michael Drake, I've hung out with him, bruh. He's cool. I don't care what Jason says, Michael Drake is cool. But he has no idea about this, but he caused us an insane amount of friction for about a year and a half. Because it would be like, oh, I can't record today, bro. I was hanging out with Michael Drake. And it was like, bro, I did this cool video with Michael Drake. And it was like, bro, we could have been recording. We could have made a video ourselves, bro. And he would, at the time, he would get really defensive. He had a short fuse. Again, like John. I'm so glad that he's not like this anymore, and he hasn't been like this for a while. But, there was a couple times that he actually did blow up on Jason, and it really did feel like they were beefing for a while, and that sort of leaked into the episodes. If you were there at the time, you might remember, but it was always like Jason was trying to get us to record, and Jacob, he wasn't as good at communicating as well, which... Lack of communication is, of course, not going to help any relationship, no matter what kind of relationship it is. But, John was kind of like that, too. He would show up to sessions late. You see it in the documentary, Paul's on time, and John's nowhere to be found, and Paul's like, Lena's late again. And then Ringo said, between 11 o'clock and 12 was the hour. But we'll get to that soon. But yeah, Jacob is like John. He's like reverse John. But like John, when he's locked in, he's locked in. And when he's motivated, he is motivated. He's going to make sure he does his part. He's going to want to be a main part of it until he doesn't want to be a part of it. Speaking of not wanting to be a part of it, Ari. Now, this one is kind of like the least solid comparison out of the four. Like, I feel the most shaky out of this one, but I'm definitely Ringo, so Ari's got to be George. That's just the way it is, bruh. But the thing is, there really is a few comparisons, too. It works better than you think. For one, who definitely had the most wild man aesthetic by the time the Beatles broke up? And I mean, nobody has grown his hair out like Ari has. There was a time when I had the longest hair, and there was a time Jason had the longest hair. He looked like Anakin. I think there was a time for maybe 2 weeks when Jacob had the longest hair. For the past few years, though, it's definitely been Ari. You know, he's got his fro going on. He had his twists in when we were in Boston. Very nice, and I think he's going for some wicks now. But not to say that he looks unkempt or anything, it's just, you know, he's got the longest hair just like George did. And if you look at like each era of the Beatles, it doesn't matter which era, George always has the longest hair. Also, George, just like Ari, was the youngest. George, to me, was like the one that was like always the most free-spirited. Also, George, just like Ari, was the youngest. Unlike George, though, Ari's always been extremely appreciated, both by us and the fans. And Ari is definitely not the quiet Cosmic, that is me. George, funny enough, wasn't either. It's just that during their tour of America, he had like some sickness and the doctors advised him to save his voice for the shows, so he got branded as the quiet Beatle. And since he didn't sing lead on as many songs, it stuck. He actually wasn't really the quiet Beatle though, but we'll get to that. Also, like George, Ari can be found oftentimes with something blazed up, if you know what I mean. I think the best comparison to make between Ari and George is to see when George left the band, how much he really meant to them. Immediately, it was Paul and John's top priority to get him back. And immediately, they began talking over pretty much every single one of their issues. There's a conversation that they had at a lunch table, and they secretly recorded it, and you can hear them going on. A lot of it's just babble, but, you know, they talk about George and ideas that they've had and what may have run him off. There's been a few episodes where Ari's just not feeling it. And when he's not feeling it, bruh, it's like trying to drag an unruly mule through quicksand. And I'm not saying that he's the mule, I'm saying the episode is the mule. And we're trying to drag it into, you know, good, funny territory. But he's the quicksand, man. When he's not feeling it, it literally just drains the life out of the episode. When he's not there, he is sorely missed. Far more than the three of us. And I know he'll try and deny that too. Oh, bro, all four of us would be missed. And yes, that's true. But the three of us, not nearly as much as him. And you know, it's just like if George is not there, the Beatles without George are just another rock band that just so happens to have an extremely over-the-top talented bass player. And you know, they have decent two-part harmony, and a rock-solid drummer, and a couple interesting songs. But they're not the Beatles. It took the mustache to make the Beatles, and it takes the fro to make us. There's a song that the Beatles made called The End, which was, fittingly enough, one of the last songs that they recorded together. And I think it was John's idea, actually, or maybe George's. Funny enough, it was not Paul's. Whoever's idea it was not Paul's. That the unique thing that they could do for that song was to have a guitar battle. So Ringo had his drum solo, which he is notorious for not liking drum solos. Then they break out into the guitar solo battle. And you can really tell the difference in the personalities just coming through in their playing. And you know, you could feel how Paul's all technical with his. George is a little more soulful with his. John's solo is just pure bulldozing emotion. Not too technical, just bull rushing the strings with a pick. And call me crazy, but I definitely do see the parallels. Which, speaking of being the observer, that leads me to me. And I really didn't realize this until I watched the documentary and I saw the boys interact with each other. I call them the boys because I'm about the same age that they were in that documentary now. But before I watched the Get Back documentary, I thought I was Paul. For whatever reason, I thought I had a lot in common with him and his creativity. I definitely do have his perfectionist tendencies, but after watching and seeing how everyone interacts with each other, that's what really spoke to me and said, Jason is Paul. I'm Ringo. You remember how I mentioned earlier that Ringo was kind of sticking up for John when he was late? You know, in his very, very calm Ringo way. Well, that's kind of me. I find myself feeling like I need to present the other side and be like, well, maybe we should just look at it this way. And maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle, you know? And I mentioned earlier that Ringo's drumming was flawless. Not a single mistake in that whole 7.5 hours. And while I don't really think I can say that my work is flawless, I definitely do feel like I can claim that I'm reliable. I always get the episodes edited on time. When I get started on a TikTok, I get it done. I don't leave them out to dry. I don't think I've missed a single week. I think there was 1 week that I had to have Jacob do it, but that was like planned in advance and I gave him everything he needed. But ultimately, I mean, since day one, it's been me. I've been the one editing the audio. You go back and listen to an old episode, the voices sound way worse than they do now. Part of that is not having the plugins that I have now, and part of that is I just wasn't as sure with the mixing as I am now. And I've made like little tweaks here and there. I'm still not 100% satisfied with the sound, but you know, that's the perfectionism I get from Paul. Last thing is, I said that George is not the quiet Beatle. He's not. Ringo is. You watch that documentary, you know, Ringo has his moments, but ultimately, half the time when he's interacting with the other guys, he's not saying a word. I think of like when they're listening to a mix and Paul's soon-to-be wife, Linda, puts her hand on top of his, and then Ringo puts his hand on top of hers, and then they just have like they try and all stack their hands on top of each other real fast. It was funny. But like Paul and John would be like, oh, I think we do like that. Well, I think I would do like this. And George is like, well, if you think of it this way, Ringo's just sitting there just being like, I just want to play my drums. Please, John, somebody howl out an opening line of a rock and roll song. I just want to play my drums. And of course, that is a pretty good parallel for how I am often in the episodes. Now, if I gotta call something out, then I'm gonna call it out. This is one way that I'm definitely not like Ringo. If I hear something and I'm just like, bruh, hold up, bruh, you did not just say that, bruh, then I'm definitely gonna call it out. But, you know, that's just because, you know, I enjoy laughing at stuff like that. I definitely have like the most ridiculous sense of humor out of the four of us, to where if something is just so nonsensical, it's probably gonna make me laugh. Like, we got the election coming up. The election will be over by the time this is up. Hopefully there ain't no rioting. There's probably gonna be rioting. Let's not kid ourselves, there's probably gonna be rioting. You guys all better be staying safe. My prediction, by the way, is, my gut tells me that Kamala will win. But I'm gonna say this right now. I could definitely see it going either way. If Kamala loses, hot take, the first woman president will be Republican. You heard it here first. Now, y'all might laugh and scoff at that, but y'all ain't living in Trump country like I am. Like, I see how it is here. Y'all don't know about that life, bruh. No. But anyways, enough politics. Young Thiessen 2024. Alright, enough. So, like, politics, right? There's a bunch of outlandish stuff that happens in politics, and I'm just like, bruh, you did not just say that, bruh. Like the whole coconut tree thing. I think the most ridiculous part, she just started laughing like it was the most funniest thing she ever heard. She's just sitting there like, wow, I'm actually hilarious. I'm gonna start laughing. You can see her mind just sort of process, did I just say that? I just said that. I'm hilarious. But stuff like that usually makes me laugh. Can't say the same for the other guys. I share a bunch of YouTube videos to the chat. So far, the only ones that I've gotten reactions are the not funny ones, the serious ones, like news and updates. Which hurts, but, you know, what am I supposed to do? Complain that they're not laughing? They can just easily turn it around and be like, bruh, if you want us to laugh, you gotta be funny. That's what I would say, so fair enough. But yeah, that's my spiel for tonight. I think that one of the reasons why the Beatles were so great is because they really were the archetype for any sort of creative group that came after. I think like any sort of creative group can point to the four Beatles and see like similarities between their group and whatever group they're in. Okay, well, either the Beatles or the Doki Doki Girls. But like not even a creative group, but like any sort of friend group too. Sometimes friend groups don't last. And it's maybe because of the same sort of differences in personality that the Beatles had. In any case, I feel like people can, you know, apply things that they've learned from studying the Beatles and how they interacted to their own friend group and make their friend group better as a result. I've tried to at least, but those three, they don't care about no Beatles, bruh. They just look at them and they be like, bruh, they're just a bunch of old men, bruh. Why should we listen to them? Ironic, isn't it? Anyways, though, yeah, okay, so our schedules are jam-packed. I don't know what to tell you, bruh. Jason's a DEA agent, so you know that he's always on the trail, sniffing out for the illicit substances. Ari is actually a chopper pilot. He's over in Afghanistan right now, so that's why he couldn't do this episode. He's shooting at people, like, day and night. I know he preaches against, like, violence and hate and all that on the podcast, but he actually is, like, the main culprit of that. And Jacob, you guys gotta pray for Jacob. He's actually homeless. And me, well, I'm actually the head advisor to the CEO of actually knocking right now, so I better go. Nice talking to you guys.